What's going on, everybody? My name is Aiden and welcome back to another video. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like the NBA analysts are back at it again, ridiculing the Chicago Bulls. There is no surprise. We've dealt with this for several years now. When DeMar DeRozan was on this team, we were called the most overrated team in the league. DeMar DeRozan was called the most overrated player in the league. And since then, with Zach LaVine and Vucevic and everybody else, and it looks like the tradition continues. It's going to happen again. And it looks like there is a certain insider, this is from, I'm reading this from MSN, that doesn't necessarily like the Chicago Bulls starting five. So with that being said, we need to honestly, and I mean this, we need to honestly and somewhat unbiasedly talk about whether or not the Chicago Bulls are going to have a bad starting five heading into next season. Because I think it's a bit of an interesting take. Ultimately, my truest answer is that there's a lot of unknowns in this Bulls starting five, and that's where there's potential to be very well surprised and be truly happy with it, but there's also potential to be massively disappointed. So let's get started. Before we get any further, if you like the video and you want to see more from me, drop a like, drop a follow, and or subscribe if you are new, and let me know what you guys think about the Chicago Bulls starting five. Do you think it's a bad starting five to walk into next season, or are you kind of in that land of unknown? Because that's where I am. I'm not going to sit here and tell you this is going to be a great starting five, but I'm also not going to sit here and tell you this is going to be the worst starting five you'll see in the league. It is filled with a lot of unknowns. And ultimately, if certain players grow and develop in the right ways, this could be a very formidable starting five. But there's a lot of questions there, and that cannot be ignored. So essentially, the report, I think the analyst is called Hughes, Grant Hughes, and he basically gave the Chicago Bulls starting five in terms of a grade, a C- overall. And he did have a couple of quotes, basically saying his chemistry with Kobe. He talked about Kobe White and Josh Giddey, saying his chemistry with Kobe White could leave Chicago's offense on track. He also said Buzelis is a no-brainer as the closest thing to a potential star the Bulls have on the roster. So it's not like he's been out here spewing, overall really bad things about the Chicago Bulls. But again, there are big questions. And this quote, in my opinion, is the one I really want to read. And it says, overall, expect solid offensive production and almost zero stopping power. If Giddey regresses, this could get very ugly on both ends. And that's kind of where I feel like the positives and negatives truly end with this Bulls team. Now, I have a different opinion on this, but it's not necessarily in disagreement to Grant Hughes. It's more of, again, trying to answer those questions. So, yes, there is a possibility that Josh Giddey can regress from what he was towards the second half of the season. In fact, it's probably the Bulls' biggest fear that that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, when I speak about regression, what I don't want to see is Josh Giddey fall back to the first half of the season where he was kind of in the middle of no man's land. He was kind of doing nothing for the Chicago Bulls in a sense, if you know what I mean. And he admitted that himself. He was not the best version of himself at the beginning of the season last season. So when I think of regression, okay, his end of the season was terrific, but a regression from this second half of the season, even if it's a slight one, to me, it's not the end of the world. Again, you expect players to kind of take certain leaps where Josh Giddey doesn't need to average a triple-double, or he doesn't need to get 18 points, 16 rebounds, and 9 assists to have a good game for the Chicago Bulls. But it just depends on the type of regression. How much of a regression would he take? Or if he doesn't regress, that's the best case scenario. He's going to have a terrific season from the very beginning to the very end. And that's exactly what we all want to see. So yes, there is a potential regression, and it could get ugly depending on how bad it is. I just hope it doesn't get bad to the point where it's looking like the Josh Giddey of the first half of the season, where he looked completely lost out there on the court, trying to adjust to a brand new team. Let's hope it doesn't get to that point, because that's when things will get truly ugly. But there's more questions. There is definitely questions, because he mentioned Maciej Buzelis becoming the closest thing to a superstar for the Chicago Bulls. Well, what happens if he has a bad sophomore season? It happens to a lot of players. Ayo didn't have a great sophomore season. Kobe White didn't have a great sophomore season. These are two players still on the Chicago Bulls. What happens if Maciej Buzelis has a bad sophomore season? Does that mean these NBA analysts are going to come swirling in and saying, well, all right, he's not going to be a superstar anymore? Because that's the worst thing that can happen to a young player, that analysts start ridiculing you because of a bad year. And judging by recent history, that's exactly what's going to happen with the Chicago Bulls team. So Matas Buzelis is kind of has a lot of pressure to really elevate his game next season. And that's pressure that I think is unwarranted because he's still only in his second year and he's still ridiculously young. So it's pressure that I think the outside noise is putting in on him, but I don't think Bulls fans are putting that pressure on him, at least not yet. So we'll see. But I feel like with Matas Buzelis, if he has a bad sophomore season, all these analysts are going to come out and say Matas Buzelis was a bad pick in the draft, or he wasn't what the Bulls expected him to be, or he was once projected to be a superstar, now he isn't, and all that sort of stuff. And that's not what we need in this organization at the moment. So there is outside pressure for Matas Buzelis there. That is a question that needs to be answered for sure. And ultimately, how can we talk about a starting five when we don't even know who our starting small forward is at the moment? I mean, who is it going to be? Isaac Okoro's a shout. Kevin Huerter's a shout. Patrick Williams is a shout. You might even throw Noah Senga in there towards the end of the year. But we don't know that starting small forward. So how is anyone going to project the Bulls to have a good or bad starting five if you don't even know what that starting five is? We know Kobe will start. We know Giddey will start. We know Vucevic will start. I'm so positive Buzelis will start, but if he doesn't, we'll probably riot. So that's one position that we don't know about. And that changes everything because you talk about defensive, expect the Bulls to have a very good offensive, presence, but have no stopping power. Well, why did we bring Isaac Okoro in if we're not going to have any stopping power? Surely he can help this Bulls team get elevated to a relatively decent defensive standing. Matas Buzelis is a relatively decent defender in of his own right. He's still a young player and will need to learn on that end, but it's not like he's not capable at all. That, to me, two players right there in positions that you probably need your best defenders, the small forward and the power forward positions. Well, there's two players right there that could get you some stops. But yeah, if we don't have Isaac Okoro in there and maybe you start a Kevin Huerter or even a Patrick Williams. I mean, Patrick Williams is supposed to be a solid defender, is he not? So you put him in the starting lineup and you expect good defensive stops in of their own right. So yeah, maybe if you start Kevin Huerter, we have no defensive stopping power. But ultimately, we signed players this season with the expectation to play defense. Isaac Okoro was brought here to play defense. Patrick Williams was signed for $18 million per season to play defense. So I don't necessarily agree that we have no stopping power, but it does come down to the balance of the starting five and what lineups are we going to use out there to get some stops. Because ultimately, Vucevic, Kobe White, and Josh Giddey is not going to scream defensive prowess. But with a couple of defenders in the team that can keep the balance a little bit in check, and Billy Donovan being a defensive-minded head coach, I do expect the Bulls to have a better defensive year. That's where my disagreement is. But again, this is more of a question than anything. How is this Bulls team going to be able to translate on the court? Because this starting five might have better balance than some superstar teams out there that have better players. It's as simple as that. Like, let's give an example. The Milwaukee Bucks. Let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, right? So they might have Giannis and Miles Turner. They have, an MVP caliber player. They have one of the best centers in the league, and they have a starting five around them that causes a little bit of balance. Obviously, the Bulls starting five might not be as good as the Milwaukee Bucks starting five, but the balance might be better because I feel like the Bucks need massive guard help at the moment. And that changes the balance of the team. And maybe that's where the Bulls starting five has the edge over them. So the Bulls won't be as good in terms of actual players, but their balance is better. And sometimes that's what that really comes down to winning and losing, is just the balance of the team. So can the Bulls keep that balance? Ultimately, do the Bulls have a C- starting five? I would say maybe, because I really don't know yet. I don't know how the starting five is going to produce together. And with that unknown, I can't say he's right and I can't say he's wrong. All I could say is the Bulls have a big chip on their shoulder to once again prove another analyst wrong. We'll see if we can get it done. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned for more. Take care and peace.